Today we are finally taking a look at the very first, most bare-bone, basic, entry-level ink that Dr. P.H. Martin has. The ink that I probably should have reviewed first. We're taking a look at the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay Black India Ink. Roll that awesome intro. What's up YouTube, I'm J-Rob, battlebrawlerproductions. Today we're taking a look at the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay Black India Ink. Now I know what you're thinking, another Dr. P.H. Martin's ink review. Well, this is the one that probably should have started them all, as this is kind of their most generic, uninteresting, unflavored, unspecified, cheapest black ink for a whopping of $5.99 to $7.99 depending on where you go for 1 fluid ounce. Now I know what you're thinking, you should have started your entire ink review around this series. Well, I did, because first ever Dr. P.H. Martin ink I reviewed was actually their Bombay white ink way back, I think like 2 years ago for White Ink Month. So we're going to do this ink review now. I figured just for the sake of completeness. Now I have to say it is your standard Dr. P.H. Martin's inkwell. It is glass with an eyedropper, and you get a little list of everything it does. Like, it is a light, fast, and waterproof. Pigment is India Black. Holds in line without spreading. Flows smoothly without tip drying. No clogging, and non-toxic. So this is actually going to be for dip pens, brushes, pretty much your generic standard India ink. Now that we've taken a look at the packaging, let's break it out in the Batman sketchbook. Giving it just one quick little swatch with that dip pen. It's not the smoothest ink I've ever used, but it definitely has a lot of good, really strong line weight. So what I mean by that is that you can see there's no bleeding, there's no edging. You're going to be able to go in and create a very strong line. So I really like that. Of course, with the dip pen, you can get some variations. You can see we can go to thick, thin very easily. So I like that. Here, I'm noticing at the end as it dries, it is getting a little bit gray. I think that maybe is because of the paper. I know it's a little difficult to see, so let's move the camera closer. So you can see that it is getting a little more gray. I think that's, again, because of the paper that we're using, that this is not really good inking paper. It's just good swatching paper, which I know you shouldn't always do that. You should not be using different paper from what you can illustrate with, but that's okay. We're huge Batman nerds. We can use the Batman sketchbook. But yeah, no, it actually isn't that bad. I do think it is drying really quickly. I could really see it right here. So in terms of a full dry, I'm not sure what that dry time is, but it says it's fast drying, so we'll find out as we do our illustration as normal. Let's test our quill nib. Yep, same thing. It is a nice line. I do like the shade that we're getting. I think it's very strong black, so you can get some really good contrast with it. Very curious how this ink is going to work when we start watering it down. But no, it works really well with our dip pens, which is good. Sometimes inks don't actually work well with dip pens. Sometimes they work better with brushes. And then we're going to give it a test. Oh, that's actually really nice. It's a little scratchy, but I still like the feel of the brush, if that makes sense. I like how it feels against the paper. So I really feel like I'm able to go in and really work an area out. I'm noticing some gray right here as it dries, but again, I'm assuming that is because of the paper we're using. Honestly, it's kind of a standard India ink. Like, it doesn't do anything, at least from what I can tell from our swatches, anything super amazing, but it's doing its job. It's doing it well. I'm assuming it can do an ink wash. Let's grab some water. It does say that it's waterproof, and yeah, it actually can do a pretty good ink wash. I do like that. So there you go. Quick little ink wash. On camera, that is way lighter than it actually is. I don't know why. In person, it's far darker. But no, this actually is pretty good. Again, it's just kind of like your standard India ink. I like that. It's not trying to be anything fancy or anything that it's not, so I can appreciate that. So I think what we're going to do is move on to our illustration. And what's our illustration today? Well, of course, it is of Wrath. Actually, this illustration was inspired by a piece of promotional art I found of Venom. However, I don't know the artist who did it, so I can't give proper credit. I just want to say that I did not originate the pose. I drew inspiration from something else. But we're going to do that illustration, and I think we'll know if this is a 10 or a 0, or where else it would fit on a scale. So let's go ahead and roll that super time lapse. Inking this piece was very fun and enjoyable, and luckily for me, I tend to keep my pencils very detailed and very clean, so a lot of my decision making is already done in the sketch phase, so I don't have to think too much with the inking phase. Just how I want the tones and blends to work with the ink washes, which is very easy to do, and the cross-hatching is also very easy to do, as I already have an idea of what I want. Raph's design itself does incorporate cross-hatching, as it's meant to be like a liquid armor that surrounds him, so I tend to go for highlights, which is why you see a lot of areas of white and areas of black on him with no cross-hatching or gray tones. Using this ink for line work work was very easy. I really enjoyed using it with the dip pen. I did notice that when I went for more of a triangle shape where I had a point, it would often bubble in a weird way. It wasn't destroying the page or the art, but it was definitely annoying and something I had to keep in mind as it would have easily smudged. Speaking of my dip pen, I noticed the ink really did stain the dip pen's nib, so much so that washing it, it didn't come off. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it has like an extra pigment to it, but it was just something that I thought was very strange and weird. Using this ink with a brush was actually very easy and straightforward. I find that sometimes Dr. P.H. Martin's inks don't really work well with a brush, but this one did. Though I will say that there were times where I had to go over it again and again and again as areas of white were showing from the paper. I don't know if I just didn't apply enough ink the first time, but it was definitely something to keep an eye out. I had to go over the piece one more time before I took my final pictures just to make sure I covered all the areas. The ink for the ink line dried super well, but I definitely gave it an extra 15 minutes just to be careful and sure. And after that, I went in with my brush to do my fill-in work, which again, I gave about 15 minutes to dry in between my ink washes, and it really does dry quick. I have to say that's a very nice and fun feature about this ink. Going back to the ink wash, those were very enjoyable, as I felt like I had a lot of control, a lot of blending, and just enjoyed the entire process. Overall, this was a fun and enjoyable experience. This is still far from my favorite ink, but it's still really good. So let's show off the final piece in all its glory. And we're done, guys. I actually really love this piece. I love the pose, I love the dynamicness to it, I love how the wings came out, and on top of that, I also love how the smoke and the splatter effect came out. You guys know I love my splatter effect. Now, as always, this is available on my Artstation account for a $1 digital download. It really does help the channel out. It's that first link in the description down below, and on top of that, you get an awesome desktop background. Now, in terms of the ink and my final thoughts on it, I'd say that there's a lot of different factors that go into rating an ink. It's the price, the versatility, how well it works with brush, how well it works with the dip pen. There's a lot of factors to it, and for this Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay Bleed Proof ink on my scale of 1 to 10, it actually gets a 5. Now, I gave it a 5 because it was great with the dip pen, it was great with the quill nib. The brush did leave a little lacking, as I found that there are many times I had to go over an area a few times to get a full coverage, but it was still easy to control and very enjoyable. The ink wash was super fun and easy, although it did damage the paper a little bit. I should have been using a cold or hot press paper, so I'm not going to hold that against them. The Bristol board itself really wasn't designed to take such heavy ink washes that I like to do, but I'm not going to complain. It did a good job there. And the price range itself being from $5.99 to $7.99, I don't think it's that bad. If you can get it for like $5 or $4.99, I think it's definitely worth your money as a good entry level, or even like a sketch ink, where if you don't want to do a full piece with your more nice expensive inks, this would be a good kind of in between where you can go in and really do your test sketches and figure things out. And out of all the inks that Dr. P.H. Martin has made that I have reviewed, it's not in my top 5, but it certainly isn't that bad, and I do recommend it for beginners or for people on a budget, or again if you want to do those sketches. So that's why it gets a 5. You know, it's kind of mid-tier, not super good but not super horrible, and I think that's really what it deserves. For me personally, I still like Zig's cartoon better. I still love Winsor Newton, and Daily Roni's FW are 3 phenomenal inks that I personally just can't recommend enough. And in terms of inks that Dr. P.H. Martin's make themselves, both Black Star series, depending on what you need for a dip pen or for a brush in those respected areas, and for white ink, I cannot recommend Bombay white ink, or personally I think the better one of choices. And in terms of white ink, I do recommend the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof white ink for correcting your mistakes. That's actually what I did to fix these areas that I smudged right here. So overall, you know, it kind of sits in the middle. It's not super good, and those are my recommendations for inks that are far better than this one. But that's my opinion. I'd love to hear yours down in the comment section down below. But with all that said, I'm J-Rod of BLACKEST Productions. I draw power and my own soul.